Good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday evening service where we are continuing a series on Bible patterns in modern times. And we have caught up to the last decade. Specifically, we are up to the year 2015. Lots of stuff happening there. We are, of course, first and foremost, always looking to the Word of God as our number one source and authority, trumping all else. And this evening, we will be there in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, chapter 17. You will all please join me there. And we are getting some background information from Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn and his writings, where he brings out some potential connections between scriptures from the Word of God and events that have been happening over these last several centuries and right up to the present, to where we are looking at. Again, we are up to the year 2015, where we'll be continuing. But first and foremost, let's see what we have here, courtesy of Luke writing the book of Acts in chapter 17, which I just preached on the other Sunday. Acts 17, Paul is in Greece, he is in Athens. So let's pick it up in Acts 17, starting in verse 16. Acts 17:16. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was being provoked within him, as he was observing the city full of idols. So Paul was there in Athens. Now remember, he's by himself because he had left the others behind, check on the other churches and meet up with him. So he's in Athens, place that is filled with gods. We understand Zeus and his whole troop of gods and pantheon group of gods and all that stuff, Poseidon and all the others. So he sees in Greece all these idols, and his spirit is provoked within him as he observes this. So skip down as Paul starts preaching to him from Mars Hill in Athens, the Areopagus. Let's skip down to verse 29. Verse 29, Paul says, describing God and us as his creation, Acts 17:29, being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and thought of man. So saying that the one true God is above all else and everything's been made by him, so nothing we make is something that he inhabits or dwells in. He's bigger than all that. He's bigger than anything we make. He made us. So what's interesting about this, Jonathan Cahn makes this point. So here's Paul standing on Mars Hill before the city's leaders, addressing the worship of these idols. He's using the same argument that the prophets had used, as we saw in the Old Testament. They are worshiping that which they have themselves have devised, what their own hands have made, which is kind of silly. If I can feel good about something I made, then the credit goes to me who made it, or especially God who made me and gave me the ability to make it. The thing itself is not, it is what it is. It'd be nothing without, the art is nothing without the artist. And the artist is nothing without the God-given ability and talent. So here's what's interesting. In speaking of the creation of idols, the apostle uses the Greek word that we translate it as T-E-C-H-N-E, techne. Yep. From this same word, linked to the idols of man, we get the modern word technology. In other words, technology comes from a word used in scripture in connection with idols. So if you wonder what's happening today, yeah, technology being an idol, that's nothing new under the sun. That has happened and unfortunately will continue to happen somewhat. So any reactions or thoughts or questions on that little snippet from Paul's message in Acts chapter 17 in Greece that we had just covered the other Sunday in the morning message series?
It's amazing to me that people can seriously worship something they've made by hands.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a gal who had a little Buddha on her desk. She's from China. And I said, oh, I've never seen a little Buddha like that, because it was a big smile. Oh yeah, she's a very joke and happy Buddha. Because, you know, in China, when children get big enough to choose, then they can choose whatever kind of, there are several. Happy with the angry Buddha, whatever. And I thought, okay, then how can you worship them?
Yeah. Well, it's like, you ever get mad at your imaginary friend? Has your imaginary friend ever disappointed you? If so, you need to check with the imaginer, because that's you. You made it up. You made them up. And so picking and choosing your own God, well, I'm going to choose a happy God. Well, I don't know why you would choose a mad God, but yeah, but we don't choose God. He chooses us. And exactly that. And anything we make is, again, to no credit to it. It's an inanimate object. It had no say in the matter. Yeah. So, but as we know and understand on a deeper spiritual level, while idols fashioned by hand are inanimate objects, as we've discussed, there is a spiritual realm and spirits contrary to the one true God, eternal spirits who were alive then thousands of years ago in Mesopotamia, alive just as well now, who are taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented by this idol worship and leading people to follow them, some knowingly, many not. And so this is covered in Jonathan Cahn's latest book, The Return of the Gods. And as mentioned last week, what he has done with this new book is a series of 5-minute, roughly, some shorter, some longer, video snippets in a little series going through, presenting some things on this. We showed one last night at the, not last night, last service, last Wednesday at the end of services. And what I'm going to do to kick us off, to bring us back up to the events of 2015, is we are going to refresh that short one again, leading into the second one, because they go from one into the other. And these were just put out there last week. So here, let me grab the mic. Is the first one showing the spirit at work behind the event at Stonewall. And is that left on? Yeah, I'll be right back. Gotta watch that. Yeah. I think one of those things for the business meetings. You can get. Oh, yeah. My apologies. Here we go. Yep, that's live. Okay, so quick refresher on this short video on the spiritual forces at work, the event Stonewall in New York City in '69 that seemed to have kicked off what led up to what took place in 2015. So here is the first clip again on Stonewall, and then we'll go to the next one that follows right after that. And here we go.
Was the event that began a movement that has transformed America and much of the world, actually connected to an ancient entity? And did this ancient entity or God actually manifest with signs on the streets of New York City? This is Jonathan Cahn. In The Return of the Gods, I reveal the mystery behind everything that is happening now that you're dealing with. And why is it happening and where is it going? The return of the ancient spirit repossessing our culture. What is the future? What lies ahead? And what do you need to know to survive and prevail? We're going to give you a taste. America, as it turned away from God, and the West as well, as the West turned away, the ancient gods or spirits returned to fill the void. In The Return of the Gods, I identify one of them as the Enchantress. She's the goddess. She's a spirit of sexuality, but she's also the spirit that alters gender and alters sexuality. It says she turns a man into a woman and a woman into a man. The movement that has altered sexuality in modern America and the world, that altered gender and celebrated it in the name of pride, all began on a summer night in 1969 on the streets of New York City in the riot called Stonewall. The amazing and stunning thing is that on that night that it began, the signs of the ancient goddess, the spirit that alters sexuality, began manifesting in the midst of the streets, the riots. When the goddess went to battle, I'll just give you a little taste. I do it in full in the book, but when the goddess went to battle, she did something called the dance of Ishtar. So in the middle of the riot and destruction, the rioters performed a dance and chanted words that went back to the ancient inscriptions of the goddess. One of the signs of the goddess going to war, to battle, was the sign of the lion's head, the lion and the lion's head. On the night of Stonewall, the lion's head manifested and marked the place of the uprising. There was even a woman, I won't go into detail, but it was almost as if a woman was channeling the goddess, who was in the image of the goddess and actually started the whole thing. And the goddess was called Storm. They called, she said, you are the great, the hymns of the goddess said, you're the loud, thundering storm. The woman's name was basically Storm, Storme. The timing of the riot, it all took place during the days of the goddess, the specific days appointed of the goddess and her manifestations, and under the full moon linked to the goddess and the summer solstice. The name of the movement, the riot, and the movement that came from it is Stonewall. Stonewall was named after the bar in which the riot was centered. The movement began in a bar. The goddess, the Stonewall, the goddess was known to inhabit, possess alehouses from the days of Mesopotamia, or bars. And the rioters tried to violently break into that bar, even set it on fire. I found an ancient inscription that I reveal in the book, where it said of the goddess, you are the stone that breaks the stone wall. Stone wall. From that event has come the entire movement that has altered sexuality, overturned marriage, launched thousands of parades, and the rainbow flag. It all began when the signs of the ancient goddess manifested on the streets of New York City. What we are now dealing with, what is now overtaking our culture, isn't new. It's ancient and it's spiritual. And the only way you can live and prevail is to do it in and by the Spirit of God. This is just a taste of the mystery revealed in full in The Return of the Gods, the latest book I've written. This book reveals everything that is happening, why it's happening, where it's going, what you need to know about the future, how it's going to affect you, and how to survive and prevail. The Return of the Gods is everywhere. Wherever there are books, you can get it for yourself and for those in your life who need to hear it. Next, we're going to open up a phenomenon that has taken over our culture, and yet behind it lies an ancient mystery from the streets of Mesopotamia. It's subscribed. You don't want to miss it. This is Jonathan Cahn. I'll see you next time with the parades of the goddess. She was the principality.
So we'll go right into that, and then we'll check in for thoughts and questions.
Is it possible that what happens every year in the streets of the major cities and towns across America and the world is determined by an ancient mystery and an ancient entity, a goddess? This is Jonathan Cahn. In The Return of the Gods, the latest book I've written, I reveal the mystery that's behind everything. What is touching our culture, changing America, touching your life and the people in your life.
Sorry.
Where is it going? What is the future? And what do you need to know to survive and prevail? It is the mystery of the ancient principalities that are coming back and possessing our culture. One principality, the enchantress, or also called Ashtoreth in the Bible, Ishtar, was all about the bending of genders, male and female. Now, I looked into an ancient inscription about the goddess, and it turns out she was the principality or the goddess of parades. In Babylon, the great parades began at her gates. Her hymns speak specifically of the people parading before her, where she made the people parade. We actually have descriptions of her ancient parades. What were her parades like? She caused men to parade through the city streets dressed up as women. She caused women to parade through the city streets dressed up as men. She caused people to parade through the streets dressed as both men and women. Her parades were known for their displays of sexual licentiousness. The parades were filled with color. And her parades bent and merged the boundaries and definitions of gender. She was the goddess known for her pride. They were pride parades. Does this sound familiar? If she returned to the world and to America, what would we expect to start seeing? The parades. Parades, the same parades again. Men, we'd expect to see men again start parading through the cities dressed as women. Women again parading as men through the city streets. People parading through the city streets as a mix of man and woman. Displays filled with color, parades filled with sexual licentiousness, the bending and breaking of the boundaries and definitions of gender. This was all part of pagan civilization. What ended it was the gospel. But if a civilization that turns away from the gospel, that has known God and his ways, turns away from him, then all these things will come back. So if you see it reappear, then you know you are living in a civilization that is morphing from a Judeo-Christian one to a pagan one. And that the enchantress, the transformer, is back. In fact, the gods are. Now you know. This is just a taste of the mystery that's revealed in full in The Return of the Gods, the latest book I've written. Now, The Return of the Gods is revealing everything, that you see what's happening and know what's happening in crystal clarity. And you'll know what's coming, and you'll know how to deal with it and how to survive and prevail. The Return of the Gods is available everywhere, wherever there are books, for you to get, but also to get from people in your life who need to know. Now, the next message is going to be the amazing mystery of something called Iunium. Hit subscribe. You don't want to miss it. This is Jonathan Cahn. I'll see you next time with the mystery of Iunium. The ancient warning, the sign.
So, reactions, comments, questions on what was presented there, and we'll see how this brings us to 2015.
He said that in his book, he would tell us how to deal with it. How do you deal with it? I'm assuming you read the book.
Yes, we deal with it by doing exactly what we're doing. We are being informed, we are being aware, and we are seeking God and drawing close to him and staying close to him and praying for and desiring opportunities to encourage others to do the same. While there's breath, there's hope, and trying to reach anyone we can with the love and the encouragement and the life that's available.
When the president of the United States at the White House had to all the colors, rainbow colors too.
Yeah. That was something.
Just had a hard time with celebrating one's sexual choices, right? I mean, whether, you're homosexual or heterosexual, I always have a hard time with, these are not things that we should discuss, right? I mean,
Well, no, I hear you.
I don't understand that, and I certainly don't understand, people bringing their kids to these parades.
That's a
and
different
stuff.
topic altogether, yeah.
Because the whole notion of this, like the goddess, is sexuality. It's not, they're not celebrating, hey, look, I bought a new car, or I got a great job, or, the whole thing it's about sex. And so, I don't know how else to look at it. I could be wrong, but that's what it's about. So for me, I just don't think it's something that needs to be on,
Everyone should know.
public display. So there is a arrogance and a pride, literally, to that.
Let me offer two things. So let me remind me there's a number two. Number one, a balance to what Sister Ashley just said. I'm in full agreement with you. Putting ourselves in their shoes. Now, there has been wrongful mistreatment of people who have different sexual life preferences.
Sure.
Again, God-given freedom to live your own life, make your own life choices, not harming any others, consensual adults, your privacy, all of that. There is nothing that justifies poor treatment of another human being, period. And so, having been, to use the word marginalized so much, there's an overreaction, the pendulum swing. We're going to, and that's part of what Stonewall was, not realizing the spirit underneath it all that was taking advantage of it all. It was after you're pushed down for so much, you want to burst out. So they're bursting out with pride in this is who I am, et cetera, et cetera. And another thing I want to make sure, so 3 things. That was one. So some of it's understandable because of the poor treatment. And so it's a reaction to that. Number 2, I want to always make the distinction as we talk about these things between individuals and mass movements and national movements and things like that. Individuals have the God-given freedom. They can choose who they want as far as when it comes to legal issues, medical issues, beneficiary issues, even to the point of civil unions. That is their freedom, their business. No government, no church, no Christian has any right to interfere with that. That is their personal private business and freedom. However, when we see a Judeo-Christian nation from its founding moving in a mass direction, not just protecting freedom, but promoting to the point of pendulum swinging and now oppressing on the other side.
What they said about the White House.
Exactly. That's when we're overcorrecting and going in an ungodly direction. We've crossed over. So from God-given liberty for all, no, we're going to tolerate everyone except we're not going to tolerate Christians. And Christians are going to be the domestic terrorists and all that stuff. And we'll see all that play out. So that was number 2. What was number 3? Well, I added number 3. What was my number 2? About this. Yes, again, here it was. The spiritual forces at B have done a complete 180 to the godly priorities and the distinction between sexuality and faith. And for us, it's the bedroom versus the public square. For us, sexuality belongs in the bedroom and it's no one else's business. I don't care what you do. That's your freedom. And by faith, I don't celebrate my sexuality. I celebrate my faith and live my faith. Don't impose or impress upon anyone else, but that is what is my life. For people who don't have that, for some people, especially if it's been denied, their sexuality is what they have. It's an exact flip-flop. And rather than don't tread on me all the way around and equal liberty across the board, it's become, as has been said, again, with the mass movement, spiritual force at power mindset, it's been a case of evil cries for tolerance. And this is a famous saying, evil cries for tolerance until it's in power, then it grants no tolerance. And so that's what we see a lot of the movement is happening. It's not a case of, yes, you deserve to be treated fairly and have your ability to make your choices in your life without any harm or repercussions. But then it becomes a case of anyone who has a different position for their own life, now you're the enemy for not just granting their freedom, but you need to celebrate with them. And if you don't celebrate with them, then you're the bad guy. I celebrate your freedom. I don't have to celebrate what you choose to do with your freedom, but I celebrate your freedom to do that. And so that's where we cross the line. So does that help with that, Sister Ashley? I know it's a big hot mess.
Well, as someone who has been marginalized and discriminated against because of who my father was, I have a hard time seeing that correlation, right? I do because sexuality should be a private issue.
Yes.
Unlike other types of oppression or abuse or whatever, right? If no one needs to know any of that stuff, I guess what I'm saying is just live your life, right? Just live your life. but I do agree with the point that, you know, when you don't have God, it's very easy for other things to become your religion. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
And then, of course, bottom line too, it's all, a lot of it is about power and control and money and where government money goes
And people
you know,
taking advantage of
yeah,
opportunities.
Exactly, so that's the human.
There are genuine, quote unquote, innocent people as far as not wanting to harm anyone else, just wanting to live their lives, who are being taken advantage of by people who take advantage and use them for their own greater purposes.
People in the theater, you
Yeah.
know, that were gay. And it was not, they didn't talk about it. Right, you know, they didn't talk about it, you know, so
We were great
everybody
friends.
else might have known but it wasn't in your face, right?
Exactly.
Because it was, you know, it was their private business.
You see, and again, for us, our understanding and the way it has been in society, in polite public society, is that sexuality is for your bedroom and your faith is your identity that you live in the public square, your character, your integrity. Now it's flip-flopped. Now sexuality is in the public square and your faith, you better keep in your church and in your prayer closet.
Well, and that's, I'm sorry, that's the problem. I told Eric this the other night. So, you know, you can go on any of the news sites, you know, it does not matter. Fox, from Fox News to Newsmax, to CNN, to ABC, to CBS, you can go on all their sites and they'll have the news. Well, if you keep looking long enough, there'll be some picture of some celebrity in some bikini or a revealing dress, you know, with some big headline about, you know, how they, you know, looked and I told him, I said, that's putting it, you know, sexualizing everything, you know, and I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that because why should I care what this celebrity was wearing, you know, out to the party or whatever, you know, I mean, so it is a problem. It's a big problem where these have become our idols. These people have become our gods, you know, and these ideologies have definitely replaced, you know, and I told Eric, I feel like I'm such a prude, you know, I feel like I'm such a prude. But, yeah, I just, it just seems like it's.
There is a line from the song I heard a long time ago, like Drew calls those lines. And they wish I had this, but not the other lines. The line in the song is sin will take you further than you ever thought to go.
Yeah, yeah. Brother John.
This whole sexuality. Were you following this for years? This is no surprise to you about the gay movement.
It is a surprise to me in the sense that the direction it's gone. I had no problem with the 2003 Supreme Court decision to legalize homosexuality. That's not the government's business. That's not the church's business. That's individual personal business. Then in 2013, when the Defense of Marriage Act was turned over, then we're starting to cross the line. Then in 2015, with the gay marriage ruling, so it's only recently that I didn't even care about who was president until 2012, when things started happening. I started observing things. I was just living my life. To answer your question about, you know, my awareness. So no, it wasn't a thing for me. I was involved in all sorts of different things, had people in all sorts of different levels of relationships, and yeah. So it was a non-issue for me. It was a non-issue until it became one. Yeah. And again, difference between individuals and respect for individuals versus a mass movement. Now, from this book, Return of the Gods, I want to share page 197, Sister Carolyn. Chapter 46, the rainbow sign. I was too lazy to type this out, so I'm going to share a couple things from this chapter here that will take us into 2015. The rainbow flag was designed by Gilbert Baker, an openly gay man and drag queen, and was first flown on June 25th, 1978. For any who are interested in knowing. There was a unifying theme and a common thread binding the different colors together. It all ties back to the goddess Ishtar, Inanna, Aphrodite, Venus, etc. Different colors. Pink represented sex, red represented life, Orange represented healing. Yellow, interesting, the Assyrian sun god was named Shamash. That's morphing of Ham, Noah's son. The Akkadian word for sun. He was Ishtar's brother. Ishtar was in fact the sun's twin sister. Yellow color of the sun, connecting with the family there. Green representing nature, turquoise representing magic, indigo. Here's a quote from the Old Babylonian hymn. At her glance, serenity comes into being. The indigo represented serenity. And violet was the spirit of sexuality, not just the sexuality of pink, but the spirit of sexuality. So there's an ancient hymn that praises Ishtar. Lord, thundering storm, you pour your rain over all lands and all the people. The rainbow was under her lordship and direction. An inscription reads, Manzat Ishtar, which means rainbow Ishtar. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the wake of a colossal rain and deluge, a flood, quote, Ishtar also came, she lifted her necklace with the jewels of heaven. The necklace with the jewels of heaven has long been understood as the rainbow. So the aftermath of the storm, the goddess lifts the rainbow up into the sky. Thus, Ishtar has been credited as the creator of the rainbow. Another Babylonian hymn praising her, her eyes are multicolored and iridescent. Comes from the Latin root iris, which means rainbow. Iris is the name of the Roman goddess of the rainbow. The eyes of Ishtar are like rainbows. We have a cat named Iris. I just learned that her name means rainbow. Then there is the myth of the goddess and the gardener. Gardener plants a tree under which the goddess lies down, falls asleep. While the goddess is asleep, the gardener rapes her. She awakens, realizes what's been done to her, flies into a rage, begins sending down plagues on the earth, goes to her father to seek his help, tells her where the gardener is hiding. She sets out to find him. How she sets out on her mission of vengeance is striking. Quote, she stretched herself like a rainbow across the sky and reached thereby as far as the earth. Ishtar is considered the first of the gods for whom we have written evidence. She was joined to the rainbow from the very start, from the very dawn of recorded history and mythology. The rainbow was a mode of war by which she exacted vengeance and judgment. Now, of course, people had no idea the spirit that lay behind it or the end to which it led, to your point about sin will take you farther than you ever wanted to go. Behind its flowing colors is a banner of war. So we'll talk more about this being a war against God here. So there's this concept, desacralization, is to take something that's sacred and use it for a non-sacred purpose. On June 26th of 2015, here's how Jonathan Cahn describes it. America breaks the sacred vessel. To take the sacred vessel of God, as did the Babylonians, use them for drinking in a celebration of the gods, lowercase. When you do that, remember, it's recorded in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, chapter 5, where Belshazzar and them, they're taking the items from the Jerusalem temple that's been destroyed, and they're partying with them, the holy items. And so they desacralized, they basically desecrated something sacred. So to use that, to do that, to take a sacred vessel and use it for other purposes is to proclaim those vessels have no real or intrinsic or built-in meaning or purpose or value or sanctity. If you can take a vessel and use it however you please, if you can do with it whatever you want, then what you're saying is that the vessel has no true value or absolute purpose. That's what happened with marriage on June 26, 2015. Remember, this is the exact anniversary of 2013 with the overturning of the Defense of Marriage Act. The exact anniversary in 2003 of the legalization of homosexuality, all Supreme Court cases. And it's the exact anniversary of Stonewall's kickoff with the obtaining of the search warrant by Officer Seymour Pine, all June 26th. And also this is on Tammuz 9 on the Hebrew calendar, the day of the gates being broken down. The gates of Jerusalem's destruction from Babylon, same date with the Roman destruction in the year 70. So here we have the same date for the breaking down of marriage in American society. Now, let me say this, because you may have heard it said by those in favor of this. Again, we're talking the mass movement here, not individual. Why did it do that? Go back up. There we go. Okay, we're talking the mass movement versus individual personal life choices. You may have heard the argument, well, us having quote unquote gay marriage doesn't stop you from having your straight marriage. It does no harm. Here's my thought on that because I tried to think of a way to describe it. Civil unions aren't the issue. That's not what marriage is. And I thought of an example. Water will always be H2O. If you didn't know the recipe, now you do. 2 atoms of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen. That is the recipe. Put those together, you have 1 molecule of water. You can't add another oxygen atom and still call it water. It's called something else, hydrogen peroxide. Calling H2O2 water, you can call it water all you want. I ain't gonna drink it. Calling it doesn't change what it is. God ordained marriage is as immutable, unchangeable as the recipe for water. Throwing different labels on something doesn't change the original. And just as water will always be H2O, H2O will always be water, so too, marriage is something that God, the ingredients are 1 man, 1 woman, under God, period. And that's not to say people can't have their civil unions and all their legal abilities and all that stuff and freedoms, but it will never be marriage that God established and ordained and created from the beginning, as Jesus said clearly in the New Testament as well. So does that make sense? Does that kind of help with that? So Jonathan Cahn says, what happens on this day in June concerns far more than marriage. It is a civilization divorcing the sacred vessels from their ordained purposes. The sacred vessels of man and woman. This is a divorce of man from manhood and woman from womanhood. The turning of each away from the other. The ramifications of the act do not manifest all at once, but begin pouring out into every fabric of the nation's culture. It didn't stay there, to the point that was made. The rainbow doesn't belong to man. The rainbow belongs to God. It is the sign he himself gave and consecrated. Like marriage and like existence, the rainbow is a sacred vessel. And so on this day in June, the sign given by God, the rainbow, is likewise taken from its sacred purpose and becomes a vessel lifted against the sacred and against the purposes of heaven. So that brings us to wakey. Oh, whoops. That's why, because that's not over there. Okay, I want to go to here. Yep. On the day when God's vessels were desecrated in Babylon, a sign appeared on the walls of the king's palace. Where we get the phrase, the writing on the wall, a hand did the handwriting about God's judgment. On the day that the vessel of God is desecrated in America, a sign appears in the king's palace. With the president's blessing, the walls of the White House are illuminated with the colors of the rainbow. The highest house in the land, a representation of America itself, now covered in the colors of desecration. Again, this is not against anyone's personal individual freedom to live their life. This is about a national overtaking of the Judeo-Christian foundation and an undoing of what has been under God. This isn't about live and let live in freedom. This is about replacing. It's about a battle between the two. It's not coexisting. It's one supplanting the other. So not everyone involved in these things intends that, but that's what's happening on the mass movement scale. Exactly. So the White House itself becomes a vessel of desecration and defiance against the ways of God. And the whole nation sees it, the whole world sees it. The rainbow is also connected to the throne of God. The book of Ezekiel speaks of the glory of God appearing in the likeness of the rainbow. The book of Revelation speaks of a rainbow surrounding God's throne. And now the same rainbow sign, the sign of God's throne, his sovereignty and authority, is used against the authority of God and on the walls of the king's palace, the throne of man at war with the throne of God. And the same king who inscribed the words of defiance on top of the tower, remember that? Is the same one that now sanctions the colors of defiance on the walls of the White House. One more thing on the rainbow here. The rainbow is also connected to judgment. I had to think about this one. The rainbow was born in judgment. It was a sign from the days of Noah of God's mercy in the wake of judgment. It's a good sign. But what happens if you take the sign of God's mercy, the sign of his desire to hold back the coming of judgment, and use it against him? What happens if you turn the sign of his mercy against its purpose? If you break it, what is left? If you break mercy, what's left? Only judgment. The White House itself becomes the harbinger. The handwriting appears on its wall in the colors of the rainbow. So, reactions, thoughts, or questions to all of that? Seeing that, I had to consider, because again, I don't want everyone to just blindly agree with what Jonathan Cahn says or anything I say. Come to your own convictions and conclusions. Take it in, consider it, evaluate it, compare it with scripture, pray about it, get a conviction. But I had to stop and think about it. I didn't want to just get caught up in this, but I wanted to take a step back and consider these things. And I have to confess, when all this happened, I did not consider the deeper implications of the time. I wasn't thrilled with the national movement away from God, going way farther than just live and let live in respect and privacy and freedom. The fact that it's become the way it's come in the opposite direction and being imposed. But I didn't realize so much the spiritual undercurrent that I'm seeing now. So for me personally, I've come to a point where I can see what he's saying, especially in the Sabbath 7 years since then. And so, yeah, it's kind of eye-opening, and we don't want to take things for granted or be blindsided or unaware.
I remember as a little boy, my mother, I asked her about a rainbow, and she said, that's God's promise that he'll never flood the earth again. Showed up after the flood.
That's right.
I just looked at it, I just popped in my head.
Yep, absolutely.
Like I say, it reminds you of beauty, freedom, tranquility.
Yeah.
So I never understood, why did they take the rainbow for their flag? I thought, well, maybe they were just, they throw it in our face,
Well,
show it as freedom for them.
two things.
Well,
That's one of
yeah,
them.
that way, and saying like, yeah, that is, yeah.
They're
The-
using it against God now, instead of pocket.
The other is, instead of just male and female, man and woman, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I don't intend to be mocking, but I can't keep up.
It's true.
And so just, that's the whole point, just as there's so many colors of the rainbow, there's so many different ways of sexuality.
That's exactly what it
So it's that,
It is a mockery.
and-
It is a mockery.
and for most people, that's where it stops. Most people don't realize or care that this is actually taking something away from God, or so they think. They're not really, you can't take anything away from God. But they're denying God and using it contrary to God, taking something sacred and making it common.
Practically, I mean, and I agree, you know, not trying to be mocking, but
No,
when I was growing up, I loved Lisa Frank stationery. They had rainbows,
rainbow,
they
yeah.
had unicorns, and they had all kinds of cute little things. You know, and nowadays, I can't have anything, you know, cute like that for fear of being identified with, you know, with this movement. And so it is socially, something happened, right? Something shifted, you know, socially. You know, I never, Brother John, my grandma told me the same thing that your mom told you about the rainbow. This was
Mhm.
God's promise to us, you know, and now, you go and you see stickers, or if you see anything on clothing, it's usually for, you know, homosexual rights. So, yeah, it definitely, even if some people maybe don't necessarily subscribe to Christianity, you can't not know what God's promise was with the rainbow. I mean, you can't, right?
yeah, and even with the science, we know the science behind the rainbows with the prism refraction and all that stuff. We get that. Who invented science? Science is just knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of what? Again, the great Christian science, the great scientific revolution was Christians discovering how God made things happen, and to God's credit and glory. So science is not contrary to God, and we will be very pro-science in the things that I present here, because a true science without agendas, honest science that anyone can come around and examine and see, proclaims God's glory and doesn't contradict God's word in the least, even the science of the rainbow. So we see God creating that and the ability for us to see God in his preservation of us, and to know that we are here by the grace of God, out of his love for us and his mercy for us. And everyone who does anything contrary to God, whether they realize it or not, however deep that goes or doesn't go, everyone has a God-given opportunity to receive the mercy that rainbow is to represent. Every human being ever born and ever to be born, that mercy, that sign, the rainbow after the flood, is a sign of mercy available to all. No matter what we've done, no matter how much we have offended God, upset him, gone contrary to him, been in his face, we need him, we call upon him, we recognize we're not enough without him, that nothing else of our own making is lasting, our technology, whatever. We turn to God, he has that mercy for everyone. So for me, that's a reminder, talk about the rainbow covering the different ways of sexuality. For me, the rainbow is all stripes of people, no matter who you are, that mercy is available. So I appreciate God's majesty in that. So we will pick up, that was all June of 2015. So we will pick up in early July next week. So any other thoughts, comments, questions on what we have looked at this evening? If not, we will go ahead and call it a day here. We'll stop our share. And we'll stop our recording and let's meet in the center and close our services in our season of prayer.